College football nerds coming at you with a quick hitter. Going to discuss just what the hell happened in this national championship game that we saw. And, you know, we're going to eat a little crow in this, but we want to remind you to hit the subscribe button so you can get the notification because we're going live next Tuesday, 8:30 Central. And that's when you can really get in those gut punches and those I told you so's and have us react and see the sadness on our face real time when we are reminded about how bad we missed this game. And I just want to tell everybody, because the comments have been a lot of fun and actually have been pretty respectful after the game, even though we kind of missed this one pretty bad. I want to remind everybody, it is really hard what we do, because on one hand, we're very numbers driven. But on the other hand, we're not a slave to the numbers, and we don't chase subscribers or chase fan following by just saying, and I said this in the video before, we were putting ourselves out there by picking the margin that we did. We might piss a lot of people off with what we pick, but that's where we saw the pick going. Sometimes we get it right. We pick a lot of blowouts. We're really good on blowouts. I think both of us were like 8-1 against the spread, including under the spread for Alabama this year coming into this game. And sometimes we get them wrong. And we will always own it on the show when we get it wrong, but we want to encourage y'all, when you come on the show and give us hell pregame, hang around postgame if you missed it, just like we do. Just a little reminder. Hang with us next year. Keep up with all your picks. Pick alongside us, and then we'll compare at the end of the year. That'll be a lot of fun. All right, Josh, enough of that. Let's talk a couple of things. So I want to talk about what happened in this game, and I want to point out kind of where we missed it. And there's been a lot of talk this week, especially there was an article earlier about Quinnen Williams talking about how Clemson didn't do anything special. Alabama beat themselves. I think that's crap. There were a lot of unforced errors, and that's a thing that I want to talk about later. And there were some things that Alabama did good and Alabama did poorly. I want to talk about those things later. Clemson won this game, clearly. The scoreboard showed it. The end-to-end showed it. After the first quarter, it really wasn't a contest. So Clemson deserves all the credit in the world. So let's start off by talking about what Clemson did right. Not what Alabama did wrong, not the mistakes they made, but what Clemson did right in this game, maybe that we didn't see leading up to it.
The biggest thing that happened in this game, really, that everyone is aware of, is that Clemson dominated on third down. But I think it's the way they dominated and the impact that had on the game that was a little hard to predict, and it was also something that had a really significant impact on the way it affected everything going forward. So we're going to talk a little bit about what Alabama did wrong and relative to what Clemson did, and I think everybody a lot of times looks at those sorts of things wrongly because they look at that and say, oh, you're not giving us credit for the win. There were some things Alabama did that created opportunities for Clemson, and the biggest thing I will say in those opportunities is that they capitalized. But the thing I want to talk about right now is Clemson created a lot of one-on-one opportunities with their receivers. They gave the receivers a chance to make a play on the ball. The receivers capitalized on those opportunities, and they turned it into points. Something we discuss a lot on this show from time to time is the fact that, one, I call out football an asymmetric sport. And what I mean by that is certain stats don't always balance the way you think they should. And things that don't really seem like they should be a significant edge. Like if you look at the total yardage in this game, up until the final drive, Alabama was outgaining Clemson. Clemson had 94 yards in the drive. They actually had under 400 yards of offense and had 44 points. It's a little tough to do that. How does that happen? Well, if you drive the field 60 yards every drive and you miss a field goal at the end of it, you get 0 points, just the same as if you went 3 and out. What Clemson did right is they took shots after shot after shot. They put the game in the hands of their quarterback. They asked Trevor Lawrence to basically win the game for them, and they trusted in him to do that, even though for the most part they had been a run team all season.
And that's something we pegged early in our preview in this game. And one of the reasons we thought that Clemson would score points, 24 points is what I think both of us picked, was we got some things wrong about Clemson's offense. One of the things we got right was they're not a sustain you 12, 15 play drive kind of team that's hard to get off the field, like a lot of these heavy RPO scheme offenses that give Alabama fits. We said they are a shot play team where they'll have stall drive, touchdown, stall drive, touchdown. And we thought they'd get 3 or 4 of those, which is a lot. I mean, that is a lot. If you look at what they did against Notre Dame, if you look at what they did against even like teams like Pitt and Boston College, it was a lot of that. So I don't think we got that wrong. What we did, I think, get wrong, and this might be reflected in your numbers or just in your observation, is that so many of those shots were so successful, to their credit.
The first thing I want to note, Clemson threw the ball on every single third down until the last drive of the game. So a lot of the statistics we're going to talk here, there's sort of 2 things I want to throw out. The first thing I'm going to throw out is Clemson's last drive, because it's not an indicator of anything. Clemson was in ball control, run the clock out mode. Alabama had just punted the ball, clearly wasn't trying to really stop Clemson. Both teams were happy to let it die. I'm throwing that out just because it isn't an indicator of anything about what Clemson's game plan was. Their game plan was to throw the ball. And that's what I was talking about, that going into this game, and really all season, they had been a run-first team, and they'd relied on Lawrence, but they had really used the run game and just used Lawrence when people were really overcompensating for the run. It's interesting that they had so much confidence on Lawrence to be able to do that. And on third down, again, all throws, they were 8 of 12 on those pass attempts. The 4 incompletions resulted in 3 punts and a field goal. So essentially, every one of those third down throws for Clemson was points every single time. And it takes a tremendous amount of confidence in your quarterback to do that. It also takes a lot to know what your identity is and to sort of scheme that way. The thing that we got wrong in that aspect is we had seen Clemson be successful in certain instances throwing the football, but in a limited aspect, because they weren't, a lot of times they didn't need to, because they were running the ball so well in so many of their games that they didn't really throw it a lot. And when they did, it was kind of a snowballing situation. What was really hard to forecast in this game is that Clemson could be truthfully shut down in the run. And you look at their final run stats at like 4.4 yards per carry. That's extremely deceptive, because for most of this game, they didn't have anywhere near those kinds of numbers. If you take out the last run from ETN, or a run in the last series where he had a 40-yard run, up until that last series where they're running out the clock, ETN was at 3.7 yards per carry. They had no run game. And we've tried to compensate with this sometimes in our model, but one thing it can never really do a great job of, because there's no way to do it, is if your run game gets shut down, can you go pass first and succeed? And what Clemson did that was successful is they said, you know what, we can't really run the ball. We're going to rely on the pass game. I'm never going to try to convert a third down with a run. I'm always going to try to convert it on the pass. And their pass game that had been kind of underutilized for the most part all season came through. And they came through with shot plays, downfield plays, really targeting their big receivers in the perimeter, really targeting Savion Smith and Josh Jobe in Alabama's secondary, getting those guys in isolation one-on-one, and just consistently winning those battles off into a tremendous effect.
So do you think this is something that we overlooked that was there hiding in plain sight versus Notre Dame? Because for a lot of that game, they didn't run it very well. I think ETN had a 62-yarder or something at the very end, but for a lot of that game, especially in the first half, they didn't run the ball very well, and ended up Trevor Lawrence 27 of 39 for 327 yards and 3 touchdowns. They were able to put it on Notre Dame when they needed to through the air. Do you think we overlooked that and attributed too much of it to the injuries for Notre Dame and not enough credit to Trevor Lawrence to be able to, and the wide receivers to be able to make those things happen, to maybe forecast that it was possible against an Alabama defense that we had said all year was not a vintage Alabama defense?
Well, first, we definitely underestimated how much that meant. It really hadn't been seen a lot through the season. They'd had big plays, certainly, in a lot of games, but not ever really this many from the passing game all at once. Now, we were on top of the fact that Clemson's receivers were going to be a huge issue in this game. It was my number one drive-home thing, and I took some heat, and I still don't actually back off this point, that I think the receivers in Clemson's offense are maybe as or more important than Lawrence. If you take away Ross and Higgins, I don't know that game goes anywhere near the way it does. I mean, those throws, the one-handed catch from Ross over the shoulder of an Alabama corner sustained a drive. It was not only a big play, but it's a drive-sustaining play.
It's third down, too.
Right. So every one of those catches, and like that throw is actually kind of off the wrong shoulder. I mean, it was inside the field. It wasn't to the sideline. Now, he had one where he dropped it in the bucket to Ross. That was a really good catch, too, on the freshman corner. But for the most part, it was their receivers out physicaling guys. And then, the one big play where the Alabama corner gets hurt, you also have to take away the fact that the Clemson receiver fights the jam and pushes the guy back far enough that, he gets hurt, but he fought through the jam, kind of caused the injury just by being physical and turned that into a touchdown. We overlooked that one by giving a little too much credit to the fact that Clemson attacked that one injured corner from Notre Dame, though there's actually a lot of similarities to how that worked against Alabama. But two, and this is always one of the really hard things when you model or look at football statistically, we really underestimated the fact that Clemson would look at that and go, you know what, we could make an offense around it. Clemson didn't just get a couple of big plays by taking shots. They took a ton of shots, and they relied on that for their offense on third down. I hadn't seen them scheme that way. So all the trends and statistics, again, we're going to talk about first and second down. Clemson didn't win those. And it didn't matter because on the downs that mattered, they found a strategy really doing one or two things that were extremely effective against a point of weakness for Alabama, and they took that, focused on it, and turned it into a tremendous number of points.
Yeah, and we were getting killed for not singing Lawrence's praise, and right now, we are. The two that stick out to me, he had an incredible back shoulder throw. I think it was in the third quarter. And then the touchdown pass right over Wilson's head on the goal line was a phenomenal throw. I mean, everybody remembers really deep balls. The one that burned Thompson early, and the other one, I think, where Savion Smith fell down. There were good throws, but that throw on the goal line was ridiculous. But what we said Trevor Lawrence is going to have some ridiculous plays, and he's going to have some where he just completely whiffs. And we saw that all year. We saw that in this game. It's just to predict him to have the game he had, you've got to say, okay, he's going to do way, 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 way better against Alabama's defense than he did against Pitt, than he did against Duke or Louisville or Boston College or Florida State or NC State or Wake. I mean, some of these are awful defenses. Some of them are absolutely terrible defenses, and some of this is at the end of the year. So they did, to Clemson's credit, to Trevor Lawrence's credit, they way outperformed what we expected. And they clearly were the better team. But when you're talking about predicting that sort of thing, if anybody was taking odds that Trevor Lawrence would be considerably better against Alabama than he was versus Boston College or Duke, I don't think there's many Clemson fans out there that would take any amount of odds on that. So that's where I kind of get frustrated when people are like, oh gosh, you didn't see it, you were killing our quarterback. No, we weren't killing our quarterback. We're just going on the numbers. We're going on what we've seen all year. And I think we saw that, but to his credit, he showed up. And here's the thing that I said to you during the game. I think where we've both been really high on Tua this year. Trevor Lawrence played within the game and what was there for the taking far better than Tua did in this last game. What do you think?
For the most part, I very much agree with that. There were several plays in the game that really came down to the fact that Lawrence was willing to take a crossing route or a 12-yard route that was available to him, and Tua was not. In particular, there was a sack fumble in the game. Tua has a cat corner blitz, so he's got the corner blitzing in. It isn't picked up properly. You're not supposed to let a guy come inside. The left tackle should actually kind of shade into the corner and let the DN go. You don't want the faster player coming in free inside. But Tua should see that, and he should just dump the ball off to his crossing route. It's an easy first down on that play because the guy's uncovered because the guy comes in a cat corner blitz. He doesn't do it. There's a very similar play also in the game where Trevor Lawrence basically does the exact opposite and throws it to Armani Rogers, and he ends up being a 26-yard completion. That's sort of the difference between the two guys. Now, with what you said there, I'll step back a little bit and say it's hard to properly evaluate either guy because the difference in the pass rush between the two. It's a lot easier to take what the defense gives you when you have time to throw and when you have time to make your read and make the decision you want to make. One, he makes a mistake early that I think put him off. And then two, there was really no point where he had a clean pocket. Maybe a couple throws over the course of the game, but for the most part, he never had a clean pocket. It does really affect a quarterback over time when that happens because you know you have to take an early throw and you don't feel like you can find what's available.
Yeah, but does that get to the core of why Clemson won this game? And I really kind of want you to run with this. Why Clemson won this game and why Alabama lost this game is really just that Clemson was the better coach team, better scheme, better technicians, better at what they were doing that night, and came in more prepared and was able to adjust without panicking. Venables was sending 5-6 guys. Mostly it was mostly linebackers that he was sending. I think he had one edge blitz corner blitz that really affected Tua, but for the most part, they were never calling anything that was able to punish it. Meanwhile, Alabama, when they sent 5 or 6 guys, Clemson was able to take advantage and find ways to punish him for blitz. And so is it all the numbers, all the talk, everything that happened, is it really boiled down to Clemson just way better outcoached them situationally and preparationally?
I think to a large extent it is. So there's a couple stats, and I know you want me to run with this because I have some interesting sort of factoids on it. The first stat I'll break down here as we transition from talking about what Clemson did right now to talking about what Alabama did wrong.
Okay, before you do that, before we move on to Alabama, I want you to summarize a lot of the things that Clemson did well, and I want it to be clear that we are giving them credit for the win, for all of this, and not making excuses for why Alabama lost. Because when we move into what Alabama did wrong or what we missed on Alabama, it's going to sound like we're making excuses for our picks or for Alabama, and we're not. And I just want you to kind of summarize how Clemson was great before we move into Alabama.
So the way Clemson was great, really, there's two things Clemson was great at. One, Clemson had a great game plan to force isolation with the outside receivers, throw those isolation plays to the outside receivers. They didn't target Patrick Surtain very much. Patrick Surtain recorded the only pass breakup for Alabama. Pretty much just attacked the other side of the field, really attacking that Savion Smith or Josh Jobe position or the safeties in isolation. I think it's telling when guys like Armani Rogers and Renfro were almost a non-existent part of the offense. Those guys combined for 40 yards of offense in this game. Higgins and Ross combined for 234 yards. Clemson knew where they had an advantage. They focused on that advantage. They have 2 almost certain first-round draft picks at receiver at this point, I think. They have a first-round draft pick at quarterback. They let those 3 guys win them the game on offense. And then on defense, they knew they had an advantage at defensive line because their defensive line is excellent. They knew they were weak at safety, and they were pretty good at corner, good at linebacker relative to a national title caliber team. What they did is they tried to anticipate the plays. They rolled coverage. They didn't let their safeties get isolated. The one time they did get isolated, they got burned for a touchdown by Judy. And for the most part, they tried to protect the safeties. They let Alabama move down the field slowly and waited for the defensive line to create disruption without giving up a big play by allowing the safeties to be caught in isolation. So those are the 2 things Clemson did, and I think the shortest way I can put it, one of the things that's been in common with teams that beat Alabama is you have to have a handful of guys that are better than what Alabama has. You've got to have some first-round draft pick kind of talents. If it's Laquan Treadwell or Chad Kelly, who's a phenomenal quarterback.
Mike Williams. Mike Williams and Deshaun Watson. I mean, that combination making ridiculous plays down the stretch is what won it for them.
And if you do that in a game of football and you spread teams out, you can get those guys matched up in Alabama's guys. Don't let them get numbers to help with that advantage, and you can win that matchup repeatedly and not try to win the others. That's what Clemson did right, and it's what gave them both a chance and the ability to win the game the way they did. Now I'm going to turn it around and talk about why things kind of happened how they did, and tell you that point that Clemson had a game plan to take advantage of matchups, and note the fact that Alabama played into their hands by not trying to do anything to exploit the other matchups that Alabama had. the first thing I'm going to note is an overarching point in this game in statistically how it played out. Clemson's yardage, throwing out again that last possession, was 240 yards on third down. That was 20 yards per play. And it was 148 yards on first and second down at 4.77 yards per play. I don't think I've ever seen that kind of disparity in a game before, where on third down, Clemson was ludicrously dominant. 20 yards a play on third down averaged over the course of the game, and less than 5 yards per play on the rest of downs. Put specifically towards Lawrence, he threw 32 passes. He threw 20 on first and second down. He threw 12 on third down. So he threw about equally first and second, about as many passes in first and down or on second down as he did on third. But the first and second down throws went for 5.4 yards per attempt. The third down throws went for 20 yards per attempt. Again, same number as the third down yardage because every third down was a throw. So the first thing to sort of note is Alabama actually dominated this game on first down, won the game, won second down, and got humiliated on third down.
And that's on both sides of the ball.
Both sides of the ball. And you have to kind of figure out why that is. And when we say both sides of the ball, one of the statistics that kind of comes out of that is the number of wins you have or successful plays. And a successful play is at least half the yardage needed on first down. Alabama got at least 5 yards on first down 42 times. 42 first down plays, period, is a lot. And the fact that they had 42 successful is insane. Clemson only had 18. So that's kind of giving you an idea of what the disparity was. The question is, why did that not matter? How could Alabama dominate early in the sticks like that and it get killed? The first part is what we've already talked about, the fact that Clemson was willing to take risks on third down, willing to throw those isolations, were very successful with it, but it takes a tremendous amount of trust to keep going to that well over and over on a third and long. Clemson was averaging 3rd and 8, where Alabama was averaging 3rd and 4.5. So, you have to give a tremendous amount of kudos or credit or what have you to Clemson to be able to do that. And it's easy to say that's not sustainable. And there's a temptation to say, if you're 3rd and 8 and you repeat yourself, you're not going to have that much success. I think watching how this played out, I don't think that's really true. Clemson had a matchup advantage. They had a quarterback that could make those throws. They had receivers that could catch them. And they were facing some corners that, due to injury, Alabama started this game without their number 1 corner. At one point, their number 3 corner goes down to injury, and they're missing their number 1, their number 2, and their number 3 pass rusher effectively. That was a good game plan to attack that point. But the thing I want to focus on for Alabama is first and second down and what that meant. So there's a handful of things here at play. The first thing is you got to throw out their first full 2 drives if you're looking at game plan. And the reason for that is this first 2 drives where they scored were scripted plays produced by the offense and part of an overarching plan from the coaching staff. Those plays were well executed. They were well run. They were balanced. They scored touchdowns with ease. The rest of the game, when they were calling play to play, was abysmal. And it's rare to hear me say this on one of these shows. I've said it with Ed Orgeron and LSU a few times. I said it in 2017 against Clemson when Auburn played them. And I'm going to say it this time.
And anytime Doug Nussmeier coached a game.
Okay, for that, fair enough. This play calling was horrid. I don't say that a lot. I don't say it lightly. It was horrid in this game.
You got some examples?
And I do. So, I'm going to take you through one series here to sort of give you a clear example to talk about how this game turned. So at one point, Alabama kicks a field goal to go up 16-14. But we're going to say it's 14-13. They're going in the drive that leads to the field goal. Alabama starts the drive with a 12-yard completion, a 13-yard run, and a 12-yard completion. So at that point, they've gotten 37 yards, almost half the field in 3 plays, okay? They get to the Clemson 15-yard line after those 3 plays. Alabama then runs the ball on 6 consecutive plays, going 9 yards, 8 yards, 6 yards, 4 yards, 1 yard, and then it was the false start. There's a couple problems with this. One, it's the fact that once you've run it 3 or 4 times in a row, it became really obvious to Clemson that they were going to run the ball. And Clemson was able to crash the linebackers, attack the line of scrimmage, and stop the run. The second thing is that because Alabama gave up on trying to get a shot and actually trying to score with a passing game, It forced Alabama to run 6 plays in a row without having a false start or any sort of negative play or penalty. Obviously, that didn't happen. They ended up with a false start and getting backed up. So you have 37 yards on 3 plays, and then even though the run seemed successful because they sustained drives, you still only had 28 yards on 5 plays. So you went from 13 yards per play to 5.6 yards per play when you gave up having a balanced mixed play call selection. That afterwards, after they ended up in that the false start, they call 2 passes in a row, both passes thrown behind the line of scrimmage, netting negative 1 yards and a field goal. One fun fact here is that Alabama in this game on 3rd and 3 or less had 16 times they were in that situation. They ran the ball 14 of the 16 times, and 2nd and 3, 2nd and 2, 2nd and 1, 3rd and 3, 3rd and 2, 3rd and 1. 14 of 16 plays were runs. The 15th was the shovel pass in that series that led to the field goal, so it wasn't even a real pass. The 16th was a mid throw to Devontae Smith that he dropped that actually would have been a 20-yard completion and sustained a drive. So there was no balance here. So getting back to this point, okay, Alabama kicks the field goal. They go up 16-14. Clemson starts the pursuing drive essentially on the 50 because Alabama kicks the ball out of bounds. Then they have a pass interference. Clemson drives 50 yards, scores the touchdown, goes up 21-16. This is the point where Alabama never responds. That drive following the 21-16, again, the last drive had been a 5 straight play run series before they got a false start and tried to throw it. This next drive, they start that drive with 6 runs, netting 31 yards. That's a 7-yard run, a 2-yard run for no gain, 3rd-yard run on 4th down, 8-yard run, and an 11-yard run. Again, that sounds like you're being pretty successful, and watching it looked like they were driving, but that was 6 plays netting 31 yards. Again, right at 5 yards per play. That's competent offensively, but it's not moving the ball great, especially compared to how they'd gone to that point in the game. It was at that point that they're at 1st and 10, I think on the Clemson 44-yard line. They've run the ball 6 times in a row. That's when Alabama took their shot that resulted into a 2nd interception. So looking back at it again, when you throw out the fact they'd thrown only twice following a false start when they were in I think 2nd and goal from about the 7-yard line, they felt like they had to. They had run the ball for essentially 11 consecutive plays. Now, in one part, you can say they're not going to expect the pass, but the problem is Alabama's now on the 40-yard line. It's 1st and 10. You know they're not throwing the ball on 3rd down hardly at all. And everything there points to a shot play. So Clemson rolls coverage. They go to a cloud coverage. They catch Tua not seeing the corner floating back, and that's how they get them an interception. That whole series really points out the problems that they created for themselves versus Venable. If you've run it 6 times and you're on the 44-yard line, everybody in the stadium kind of knows it's a good shot opportunity for a shot play. And what's significantly worse in my view is, again, on that 2nd interception drive, the first play of that 2nd interception drive was a 7-yard play, which means they faced a 2nd and 3. They also faced a 2nd and 2 on that drive, two plays before Tua threw that 2nd interception. So they had a number of opportunities to throw the ball on a 2nd and short or a 3rd and short where Clemson wasn't expecting it. But again, I already pointed out the fact that it was 3 or less. Alabama ran it 14 of 16 times. If it was 3rd and 4 or greater, they threw it every time. So what you ended up with was a situation where if it was 3rd and long, Alabama was going to throw it. If it was 3rd and really short, they were going to run it. There was no in-between or balance. Clemson could always predict what they needed to do. They could protect their safeties in a 3rd and long situation without fail because they weren't going to try to draw. Or they could, on a 3rd and short, attack the run, and they were pretty successful with it. Alabama kept having to go for 4th downs. And because of that also, it meant, Alabama, who was running the ball enough, often more than 6 yards per play, probably could have gotten some first downs on the run on 3rd and 5, 3rd and 6, but it's like they were so scared to end up punting the ball that they never tried to score.
And I do think a lot of what you said reflects either poor game plan or preparedness, the scripting plays is interesting. And Tua, I pulled together a stat earlier. I think he was like 9 of 11 for 150 yards and 2 touchdowns on their first 2 drives besides including the interception drive. So scripted plays, they were great. They were very comfortable. It's almost like the play calling went completely sideways, but it didn't for Clemson. And that's where it comes back to, these are things Alabama did poorly, but they are a reaction to, one, Clemson not doing things poorly and Clemson executing, which is in turn putting pressure on Alabama. And it's putting pressure on them in ways that makes their players drop passes. It makes their coaches call these, ridiculous string of the same predictable stuff over and over and over again. So some of this is, going back to what we were saying before, some of this is what Alabama did wrong. Like, I said something about unforced errors, and people killed me in the comments, and they're like, well, Clemson's, you're not giving Clemson credit. It all matters. The fact that Alabama has been super, super tight in big games for the last couple of years, it's undeniable. They make more unforced errors that you'll see in these games than you'll see in any regular season game. And we saw it in this game. We saw it at Oklahoma. We saw it in Georgia. There's nothing Clemson is doing schematically to make the same guy have a red zone procedure penalty on the offensive line 4 games in a row. There's nothing Clemson's doing procedurally that is making a guy kick a ball out of bounds or miss an extra point. He's been doing that all year long. So maybe that's not just a big game thing for him. There was a perfect example series. I think it was when they had to kick the field goal. So they went false start, mental mistake, had to kick a field goal, kicked the ball out of bounds, then had a 15-yard penalty. So they're already pressing. They're already trying to, stay in the game. They finally get even, get a little bit ahead, and bam, 2 plays later, Clemson's back in the end zone. So,
and that leads to the drive that I was giving as an example.
Right.
That's directly where that led.
So, there's 2 sides to this. One is that Clemson didn't react negatively and have a lot of pressure and have the pressure get to them in a way that made them do a bunch of stupid stuff. They weren't dropping passes. They weren't kicking the ball out of bounds. They weren't having late hit frustrated procedure penalties. And I think there's this pressure with Alabama that comes with expecting to win all the time and just roll your helmet out there and beat somebody. When they get punched in the mouth, they don't handle it very well. They need to be able to steamroll somebody. And when they're getting a lot more resistance than they expect, they don't handle it very well. So that's to Clemson's credit. I think some of the unforced errors are just something ridiculous that Alabama teams are doing on a big stage. And some of the errors, the interceptions were unforced if you look at them, because the first one wasn't a scheme thing. Herbie kept saying it was a scheme thing. It was a bad throw, and Devonta Smith he was blocking on that play. So he wasn't throwing him the ball. That was also, though, to Clemson's credit. The second interception, Clemson's credit. So I do think that and this is a long diatribe, and I'm sorry, I just wanted to say there are things that Alabama did that Clemson had nothing to do with. Kicking the ball out of bounds, nothing to do with. But there's other things where Alabama looked bad that was a direct reaction to Clemson handling their business and Alabama either panicking, cough, cough, stupid fake field goal, or QB sprint on 4th down. Those things were a direct reflection on or reaction to Clemson handling their business.
We talked about trends. That QB run on 3rd down on the goal line was the only time they ran the ball on a 4th down and more than 2 yards. They threw it every other opportunity on 3rd and 4th down. But to your point, and I'm going to mix the two here, what Clemson did is understood what was going on in the game. They out-schemed and out-coached Alabama. These teams aren't so uneven in talent that this game should have ended 44-16. I don't think that should surprise anybody to say that. But Clemson out-coached Alabama so badly that it took this game that Alabama, again, dominating on 1st and 2nd down, could get destroyed on the scoreboard. And it essentially what happened in this game is Alabama had to try to win the entire game on 1st down. Because of the situation I was talking about with 2nd and 3rd down, in particular, the fact that they would get to a 2nd and 3 and they would always run the ball. What that meant is you only threw the ball downfield on 1st down, because it got a 1st down. You'd throw the ball and you get a 1st down, and you either would have another 1st down to try and get a big play, Or you'd run it and you get 7 yards and to be 2nd and 3, and you knew they were going to run on 2nd and 3, and they were going to run on 3rd and 1, and then they were going to run on 4th and 1, because that's exactly what happened in that drive I described earlier. So the only time Alabama ever effectively threw the ball was on 1st down. Clemson knew that. And this is tying it all back together. As I said, I'm trying to give this back to the fact that what Clemson did is they said, we're going to let you have 1st down. We're going to let you throw the ball. We're not going to try to stop the running backs really on 1st down. We're going to give you some rush yards on 1st down because we're going to protect our safeties by keeping them back. We're going to do that by getting our linebackers back so you can't run your RPO scheme because the linebackers are in the way. And we're going to let you run the ball because we know you're too stupid, frankly, that after you run the ball, because we've floated our linebackers back, we let you do your RPO read to do the run, you get 6 yards, you're in 2nd and 4, and you're going to try to, now at this point, you're going to be so focused on moving the sticks that we can walk our safeties and linebackers up, crash the run, and stop you, and you're not going to even attempt to throw the ball down the field on 2nd and 3 or 3rd and 2 and burn our coverage downfield. That's to Clemson's credit. It's the error Alabama made. They've made it in the past couple games, I think, looking back at this, but it's something that they picked up on. Venables schemed. He protected his weaknesses, and he let themselves lose statistically on 1st down and to a lesser degree on 2nd down because it put them in a situation where they're able to win. And then the last talking point I'll make here is to sort of note just how much the offensive success Clemson had really sort of affected the game and how close this was in a weird way to not being such a big blowout. You have to give Clemson full props for what they did on 3rd down, but you also have to note how much those plays affected the game. 4 plays in particular. It was a 74-yard that were big plays on passing plays on 3rd down that were either touchdowns or led immediately to touchdowns. There was a 74-yard catch and run where Savion Smith got hurt, went down, and I don't really know what you could do about that from Alabama other than not be in that position. There's the 62-yard catch, which was the early pass you talked about where I think Lawrence made a good throw, but it was really a coverage bust. The safety doesn't get back. They throw over the top to T. Higgins. Clemson ended up scoring the next play. 37-yard over-the-shoulder throw to Ross, and that was followed up by a 17-yard catch, which is his one-hander grab. They scored on the next play. There's a 26-yard catch where Rodgers came across the field on 3rd down, scored on the next play. So you have 4 plays that were all either touchdowns or scores or it was a long pass play immediately followed by a touchdown. And the point I want to make there is that was your 28-point differential in 4 plays. All 3rd downs. If Alabama breaks those passes up, if they generate a pass rush, those plays all turn into punts. Clemson doesn't score, and this is essentially an even game.
But you're not saying let's discount these and it was a really close game. And I want people to see that as well because they're going to take what you just said and say, oh, well, if you just take our 4 touchdown plays off the board, then it's a tie ball game. That's not what you're saying. I mean, and so I want that to be clear before you guys get us out of the comments that's not what you're saying, correct?
Correct. So there's 2 things here to understand. One, and we talked about this ad nauseum at the start, and this is running late enough that I don't want to go on too long. Clemson intended to try to get those plays on 3rd down. It was their strategy to create those plays, and they succeeded in doing them because they had a matchup advantage on the outside where they could execute those plays. Like I said, with Smith falling down, it wasn't a complete fluke. I mean, Ross is getting off the jam consistently. He was able to create separation. Ross made the catches that did this. It's not like they fell into their lap. There were, I would say 2 of the 4 were real mistakes. There was a coverage bust from the safety, and there was a man-zone mix-up from Alabama where Alabama gifted Clemson. The other 2 were Clemson outplaying Alabama. And the sort of the point I want to make is really Clemson attacked an area where if you can win those 4 plays, you can put up 28 points and win the ball game. And if you don't make those 4 plays, you don't win the ball game at all. And I want to point out how important it was that they were able to do this, how important it was they strategized that way. But like you talked about, sometimes people say if you take those touchdowns off the board, oh yeah, you take our 4 touchdowns out and it doesn't matter. It's a little different than that because these were all 3rd downs and they're all end up being punting situations. So I do want to throw a little bit of a caveat on that It's not just like, a first down bomb. Well, you take that away. Yeah, you still got second down and third down. You still got to stop them on the drive. It all could have been drive killers, but it was Clemson's strategy to attack them. It was Clemson's strategy to be aggressive in attacking them. Alabama was completely the exact opposite. They were way more worried about trying to get the first down in every series than actually scoring points, which is what you need to win the ball game. They did not attack vertically in anything but first down, where they felt comfortable that they had 3 more downs to try to get a first down. And because of that, they never succeeded in scoring, where Clemson on third down said, you know what? I'm not going to try to get 8 yards here. I'm going to throw down the field and try to score a touchdown. That's why they won this ball game. And to your point with Quinnen Williams early in this, they didn't do anything special to the extent that they picked a one-on-one matchup and they threw at it. But you know what? It was the smart thing to do, and they beat you when they did it. And that, at the end of the day, is what matters. So, if I'm Alabama, I feel worse from the fact that Clemson had a simple matchup and won it, because that just means they beat you straight up, and that is why Clemson was the better team in this ballgame.
How much of this strategy, the home run strategy, was influenced by the fact that, like you said, Alabama's 3 best pass rushers were not in this game. Their best corner not in this game. And that's not making any excuse for Clemson. This is back to the point that they saw a matchup advantage. Alabama's pass rush, first of all, their defensive line, their front 7 is razor thin. And we saw this come into play against Oklahoma. We saw it against Georgia. They had no pass rush against Georgia. How much of this was, okay, we know Trevor Lawrence is going to have plenty of time, and if they really want to put pressure on him, they're going to have to send both their linebackers. So because of that, we can get him in an opportunity to make these hero throws. We know we probably can't drive the field consistently, but because they're not going to get an effective pass rush, we're going to take our chances, and we're probably going to win some of these 50-50s.
I think there's really 2 things that made this happen. The first, to your point, I think this, from the jump, it was a strategy Clemson had in this game because they knew it had a matchup advantage. Nick Saban talked about after the game, he knew that they had a schematic problem there. And I'm still not quite sure why Alabama didn't do more to protect it in terms of, and there are ways you can protect it by dropping into cover 3, by mixing up more zone coverage, effectively by not making your corner stay one-on-one with Justyn Ross.
And if you're going to run a zone, everybody runs the zone, not just half the field runs the zone.
Right. Effectively doing things where you're not a one-on-one opportunity. So I do think it was very intentional, though. Clemson knew they had a matchup advantage. They pressed it. Alabama didn't do a good job of doing it on the opposite end. But the second thing, and it's a point that you've been alluding to the whole time, Clemson also did this because they knew they were winning. And they were ahead. And it changed the complexion of the game to a great degree. Because Clemson, at no point was Clemson ever really scared, starting about halfway through the second quarter, that they were going to have to punt the ball and lose the game. They knew they could throw down the field on third down. They knew they could take those risks because if they got the catch and they got a touchdown, they'd blow the game open. And if they didn't, they would punt the ball, and Alabama hasn't scored consistently anyway. Alabama, and I really feel like their offensive coordinator in particular, fell victim to this idea, crap, we're down 2 touchdowns. It's 3rd and 2. If I throw the ball here and don't get it, we lose because Clemson's been scoring.
Right.
And so you get so panicked about not having that one play lose you the ball game by not getting a first down that you focus everything on trying to get 3 yards. The problem is that's super predictable. Clemson is way too good to be that predictable. And like we said, otherwise, if your second and third down is always about trying to get a first down, at no point are you ever actually trying to go for the end zone. So they effectively put themselves in a situation where first down was their big yardage play, and second, third, and fourth down were always just trying to get the next first down, whereas Clemson was trying to score every play, and that really made a tremendous difference in this ball game. And it was mostly due to the fact that Clemson was winning.
So tell me, we talked about going into the Oklahoma game, and the people that watched our preview for this game will laugh because we said Clemson wasn't really built like this. But anyway, we said going into the Oklahoma game, one of the things, if we were Alabama fans in this, if we put our Alabama hat on and our Alabama coaching hat on and say, okay, of the teams in this playoff, does Oklahoma scare us the most? Because we've had some concerns on defense. We know we have an elite offense, but when your defense starts giving up consecutive scores, it puts mental pressure on you and you change how you play the game. And maybe you win a track meet because Alabama, Oklahoma, I think Alabama wins a track meet. But the thought was, what if it's looking in the third quarter like you're going to need 45, 50 points to win the game? Alabama could easily score 45, 50 points on a normal situation against an Oklahoma defense. But it does something to your mentality. So is that exactly what we got in the Clemson game, where what we thought might happen in the Oklahoma game actually did come to head in this game?
I think to a large extent it did. I think there was also something to be said that when going got tough, Alabama decided that the run game was working and they stuck with it to an absurd degree that killed their offense. We were critical about this dealing with the Oklahoma game, that Alabama, when they went ball control, is when they let Oklahoma back in that game because they didn't keep their foot on the accelerator. They didn't try to keep scoring, and they didn't distance themselves from Oklahoma, where they never made Oklahoma play outside their comfort zone and have to throw down the field. Clemson was able to do that. And I do think it's exactly what you said. Clemson put pressure on Alabama to keep up when Alabama sputtered. And all of a sudden, it really threw them out of whack. And again, it goes back to the fact that Clemson played loose. They played aggressive. They played to score every drive. Alabama played not to lose the game. And when you start playing to not lose the game, when you start playing to stay in the game rather than attacking, rather than running your game plan, you get unbalanced. You stop doing what works. Their RPO scheme, which should have been killer on those second and third downs where they had so many second and third and shorts, was non-existent because they weren't trying to throw down the field. It just all really snowballed. And again, it can't overstate the fact that when I talked about how there were a handful of plays that made the game, basically what I'm getting at is Clemson was willing to put themselves in a situation where if they screwed up on these 4 plays, they could lose the game. Because if they did them right and they had confidence that they were going to do them right, they would win it by a significant margin. Alabama was completely unwilling to make that same sort of decision. I don't know if it was because of the fact that Tua turned the ball over early. That may have been something to do with it. But I think to a large degree, it was just the coaching staff being too conservative. It's why I bring up the Oklahoma game, because they did the same darn thing in that game. I think the offensive coaching staff and the play calling in that game just was not willing to be aggressive and loose the way Clemson was.
Yeah, I think it was because Clemson had so much early success combined with the turnovers that, I mean, they went for it on 4th and 1 on their own 35. They had the fake punt. They had the QB sprint out. They were coaching, like you said, they were coaching that game almost scared, very reactionary. And Clemson, even when Bama was going blow for blow with them early on, Clemson just played their game. And this is the last point I want to make. And it was talked about during the broadcast, and I'd love for you to touch on it for a minute. We were going so over. We said 20 minutes. We said we were going to do this in 20 minutes. That's funny. How much of what we saw in this was the fact that Dabo's kept this staff together, and they knew what they had, and they knew what they could do, and they've been in the trenches together for a long time, and they didn't panic because they've been there, done that all together, whereas Saban yet again has got, a new staff that he had out there in their first national championship game together, and it showed.
The greatest irony I can point to in this game is that Saban always preaches about the process, right? That you do the next play and you play the next play. Dabo Swinney, with what he's done with his staff and the way he's built it, is concerned about having an environment where the coaches like being there, where the players like being there. They still work very hard and do what they need to do to win, but they're focused on playing the game. And they went out in this national championship with a mentality that they were going to play their game and see how it turned out. Alabama came out worried about winning. I think their coaching staff was worried about winning the game. The play calls were focused on winning the game. They were not worried about playing their game. So to me, so much of what this is the fact that Dabo Swinney basically has created a sustainable culture. He's kept his coaching staff together. He's worried about doing what he needs to win this game, and he focused on this game as much as they were really focused on it because it was Alabama and revenge factor, et cetera, et cetera. They were trying to play their game. It was another game. If they don't win, The sun would come up tomorrow. Everything was going to be okay. Life's peachy. Alabama, I think, put a tremendous amount more pressure on themselves, not just, again, play to play over the course of the game. And you can really see, I think, the difference where the grinding mentality of Alabama's football program, I think, takes a serious mental toll, takes a serious toll on coaching retention and a lot of other factors. Dabo's mentality, which it's easy to criticize in certain ways, it's a lot more sustainable. They were a lot fresher in that game. The coaching staff stayed together, and you see all the benefits of keeping that sustainable process versus Alabama, which I think kind of ground themselves down in a lot of different ways.
All right, give me your final words on this one, and we'll close it out.
My final words on this game is essentially that if you played this game again and you switched the coaching staffs, I don't know how much of a similar game you would have. Because if Clemson had the Alabama coaching staff that was unwilling to take risks on third down and throw the ball like they did, I don't think Clemson wins this ball game. Because on first and second down, when all things were equal, Alabama was playing better than Clemson. And likewise, if Alabama was willing to take more risks, I think they could have done better. I think more often than not, Clemson's going to win this ball game because of the fact that they passed more successfully, because of the fact that Alabama was turning the ball over. But the reason this game got so out of hand was the fact that Clemson was willing to be aggressive. They took chances. They took intelligent risks, knowing they had an advantage in those situations. They executed in those situations, knowing, again, with those the whole point of me pointing out those 4 plays, there was maybe a 35% chance those plays don't work out, that Ross doesn't make a one-handed catch, and all of a sudden they're in a really tight game because of it. They were willing to take that risk because they knew more likely than not that it would turn out positively. Alabama made no such risks, and it's why they lost the game, because they kept it way too close to the chest, except for the fake field goal, which was the most baffling risk you could ever take.
For all we got wrong and all the model got wrong and right, it said 5.88, I think, yards per play for Alabama. They got over 6 and only got 16 points. And I think that's reflected in poor coaching, poor preparation, because they got theirs. Their offense was doing what it needed to do, and they couldn't win because they were out-schemed and out-coached and outflanked. So, y'all, Clemson deserves all the credit. Quinnen Williams is a great player, but I don't think he's great at owning where he got beat man to man. I mean, he had a good game too, but you got to give credit to the winning team and the team that beat you. And Saban's really good about that. Damian Harris was good about that after the game, but Quinnen, he ain't gonna watch this, but I love you. You got to give him credit. So. Credit to Clemson. We're going to be on a live show Tuesday night, 8:30. If you want to just get at us and tell us, haha, you were wrong again. We've heard it in the comments. We've heard it on Twitter. We will listen to it again. And we'll talk about maybe a season wrap-up and maybe get into some off-season discussion. There's been a lot of turnover, coaching changes. I think Kyler Murray is still considering maybe going into the draft. So we'll talk about it Tuesday, 8:30, and let us know in the comments what you think we got right or wrong in this video, and we'll engage you there as well. Thanks so much, y'all. Have a great week, and God bless.